Welcome back to my shop. I appreciate that you take the time to watch this video. Today I'm going to build a bike repair stand. Recently biking has become a bit more serious in my family, so more often there has been the need to do some repair or maintenance work, and I wanted to build a stand for that so that I don't have to bend down when I repair a bike and so that the bike doesn't fall over all the time. So I used some scrap wood, and later it turned out that I have to use some steel bars too, which I got from a local steel shop. So if you want to see how I built that, stick around. So I ran into a problem here. I thought I could cut out these cleats from this big piece of Douglas fir and use them as stands or supports that can swivel in when I want to store the stand and swivel out when I want to use it, and they should support the whole stand. But it turns out that this joint here, which is just a screw between these two pieces of wood, is much too elastic, so it doesn't support the weight when I put a bike on it. The whole thing bends to the front and it's very unstable. So I had to come up with a different solution. And I thought I might try these pieces of L-shaped steel, and I'm going to put them in like this. So this will be a much harder and more rigid surface, and instead of this wooden support I'm going to use this steel bar with a square cross section, and this will then swivel in and out like this before, but it will be put against this piece of steel, and hopefully with a screw through that and a nut at the bottom, this joint will be much more rigid than the wooden one. I'm not sure if it's going to work, but that's what I'm going to try. Now, after reinforcing these joints here at the bottom with the steel bars and the steel rods here, and using 10mm threaded rod instead of 6mm threaded rod, the whole thing is much more stable, much more robust, so that it can support the weight of a bike. And now all I have to do is finish it up, and I'm glad that it turned out to be functional.